You are about to learn one of the secrets that changed the course of human history. Before us stands an army that dominated the battlefield for centuries, relying solely on the resilience of its infantry. Thousands of warriors lined up in tight rows formed an unbreakable wall, capable of withstanding any onslaught. Such was ancient Egypt, a powerful civilization whose military might seemed unshakable. But one day, everything changed. A new, unprecedented force appeared on the borders of Egypt, which did not launch a frontal attack, but circled the battlefield, sowing chaos and panic. It was a technology that forever changed the rules of war and forced the great empire to rethink everything it knew about battle.
These chariots are unstoppable. It is over. The age of infantry is dead.
Watch the video to the end to find out how the Egyptians not only copied, but perfected the enemy's weapon, turning it into the key to their dominance for hundreds of years. What if I told you that everything you believed about the invincibility of ancient Egypt was not true? There was a dark period in its history when the mighty empire was brought to its knees. This happened when mysterious tribes known as the Hyksos came from the east and brought with them weapons that the Egyptians had no answer to.
The legions were overwhelmed. There are no survivors.
No, this is a nightmare. How could Ra allow this?
For the Egyptian infantry, accustomed to slow and predictable battles, the sight of chariots was a real shock. These were not just carts, but fast, maneuverable platforms from which archers could rain arrows down on dense rows of soldiers. The Egyptian army was helpless in the face of this new threat. The Hyksos chariots did not engage in close combat. They circled around the Egyptian troops, keeping a safe distance, methodically shooting at the warriors. Any attempt by the Egyptians to counterattack was doomed to failure. The infantry simply could not catch up with the fast chariots. This was not just a military defeat, but a colossal psychological blow. The entire Egyptian military doctrine, based on the power and discipline of the infantry, crumbled to dust. The weapons that had brought victory for centuries proved obsolete and ineffective.
The formations guarantee nothing now. They cannot protect the empire. But the Pharaohs will. He is right. Our dominance is
The
over.
defeat forced the Egyptians to face a bitter truth. To
line.
regain their
But that
land and
leaves the flank
independence,
exposed to their
they needed
archers.
to not only
if we
defeat
move
the enemy,
infantry through the
but
hills
surpass them. They had to master their technology, understand its strengths and weaknesses, and create something better. Thus began one of the most ambitious army modernization projects in ancient history. Egyptian military leaders and engineers began to carefully study the captured Hyksos chariots. They analyzed their design, materials, and tactics of use. It was a complex process of reverse engineering on which the future of an entire civilization depended.
The tension on these bindings allowed for sharper turns without breaking the wheel.
So that is how
The period of Hyksos rule was a time of humiliation for Egypt, but also a time of learning. It was this painful experience that laid the foundation for the creation of Egypt's own unrivaled chariot army. Egypt was preparing to respond. They understood that simple copying would not bring success. The Hyksos chariot was heavy and relatively unwieldy. The Egyptians set themselves an ambitious goal to create a machine that would be lighter, faster, and more stable than that of their enemies. This obsession with technological improvement ultimately led to the creation of the Egyptian war chariot. It became not just a weapon, but a symbol of the rebirth and military power of the new kingdom. Egypt had learned its lesson and was ready to regain its greatness. We are very interested in hearing your opinion. What do you think is more important for winning a war? Advanced technology or perfect tactics for using it? Write about it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next studies. Want to know the secret that changed military history? After the expulsion of the Hyksos, the Egyptian pharaohs began a large-scale military reform. They realized that the future lay in mobility and that the heart of the new army would be the chariot. State workshops were established throughout Egypt, which can be called the first military-industrial complexes in history. Their sole task was to produce the most modern and technologically advanced weapons of the time. Thousands of craftsmen were involved in this ambitious project. The pharaohs spared no expense in creating a new army. Special expeditions were sent to distant countries in search of the best materials. Cedar and yew were brought from Lebanon, ebony from Nubia, and the best types of ash. In parallel with the production of chariots, work was underway to create a new type of warrior, the elite charioteer. The most talented young men from noble families were recruited to special schools. They were taught not only how to drive a chariot, but also how to shoot a bow at full gallop. This process was long and difficult. It took decades to fine-tune production, train a sufficient number of crews, and develop new tactics. The Egyptian army was transformed from a slow-moving mass of infantry into a flexible and mobile force. Chariots became its main striking force. They could move quickly across the battlefield, deliver swift blows, and pursue retreating enemies. What was the main difficulty in trying to recreate and improve the technology captured from the enemy? But how exactly did the Egyptians turn a cumbersome cart into a light and deadly machine? In the next chapter, we will reveal the secrets of their ingenious engineers.
By repositioning the axle forward, we gain stability.
Yes, and a wider platform allows for 2 archers. The wheel construction must support the added weight.
I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of the Egyptian craftsman. Unlike the heavy and cumbersome chariots of other peoples, the Egyptian chariot was the pinnacle of engineering, where every detail served a single purpose: to minimize weight while maintaining strength. The main secret was the D-shaped platform. It was made of light wood, which was bent with steam to give it the desired shape. The floor of the platform was not a solid wooden deck, but a woven mesh of leather straps, which provided shock absorption and significantly reduced weight. Another revolutionary solution was the location of the axle. Egyptian engineers placed it at the very rear edge of the platform. This shifted the center of gravity, made the chariot incredibly stable when turning, and turned it into a stable platform for archery. The wheels were a true work of art. Instead of heavy solid discs or massive wheels with 8 spokes, as used by the Hittites, the Egyptians used lightweight wheels with 4 and later 6 spokes. This radically reduced weight and allowed for greater speed. The spokes were made of different types of wood to combine strength and flexibility. The wheel rim was also composite, glued together from several thin wooden plates. This technology made it possible to create wheels that were light yet very strong. The Egyptians hardly used metal fasteners to connect wooden parts. Instead, they used straps made of rawhide. These straps were wound while wet, and as they dried, they shrunk, creating incredibly strong and elastic joints. The drawbar connecting the chariot to the horse harness was also made using bent wood technology. It was light but strong enough to withstand the jerks of 2 horses galloping at full speed. Its shape was carefully calculated for optimal load distribution. Thanks to its design, the Egyptian chariot was not just a means of transportation, but a perfect weapon platform. It provided the crew with the speed, maneuverability, and stability necessary to fire accurately while on the move. Are you ready for the shocking truth about who drove these machines? The crew of a war chariot consisted of only 2 people, but they were the best warriors in Egypt. The outcome of the battle depended on their coordination, skill, and courage, so their selection and training were approached with particular care. The first member of the crew was the charioteer. His task was not simply to drive 2 horses, but to do so with precision. He had to choose the right speed, dodge enemy projectiles, and always keep the chariot in the most advantageous position for the archer. The charioteer controlled the horses with reins, which he often wrapped around his torso. This freed his hands to hold a large shield to protect himself and his partner. He was both a driver and a bodyguard. The second member of the crew was the warrior archer. He was the main striking force of the chariot. He had several types of weapons at his disposal: a powerful composite bow, a quiver with dozens of arrows, as well as spears and a battle axe for close combat. The training of the crews was long and exhausting. Future warriors spent countless hours on training grounds honing their coordination. The charioteer learned to perform complex maneuvers, and the archer learned to fire accurately at moving targets from a swaying platform. Charioteer equipment cost a fortune. The chariot itself, a pair of trained horses, armor, weapons. All this was available only to the wealthiest. Therefore, chariot troops were formed from the aristocracy, for whom war was a matter of honor. On the battlefield, charioteers were the eyes and ears of the commander. Their high mobility allowed them to conduct reconnaissance, assess enemy forces, and transmit orders to various parts of the army. The pharaoh and his generals often commanded the battle from their staff chariots. The coordination of the crew's actions was perfected to the point of automatism. The charioteer and archer understood each other without words, with the slightest gesture or movement. Their lives and effectiveness in battle depended directly on this mutual understanding. How difficult do you think it was to shoot accurately from a chariot platform, racing across rough terrain? The main tactic of Egyptian chariots was to bombard the enemy from a distance. They were not intended to ram dense rows of infantry like medieval knights on horseback. Before the battle began, hundreds of chariots lined up in front of the main forces of the Egyptian infantry. At a signal, they began to move, closing in on the enemy ranks. It was a terrifying sight, which in itself exerted strong psychological pressure. At a distance within range of a bow, the chariot squadrons would split up. They would begin what was known as a carousel. Moving along the enemy's front, the archers would shower their ranks with a hail of arrows. Then they would quickly retreat to reload their weapons and make way for the next wave. This continuous barrage had several purposes. First, it inflicted significant losses on the enemy army even before hand-to-hand combat began. Second, it disrupted the enemy's formation and discipline, forcing soldiers to seek cover and breaking their battle. When disorder or gaps appeared in the enemy's ranks, the chariots could make local breakthroughs. They broke into the weakened areas, dividing the enemy army into parts and attacking it from the flanks and rear. This caused even greater chaos. Once the enemy infantry was sufficiently weakened and demoralized, the main body of Egyptian infantry went on the attack. At this point, the chariots moved to the flanks, continuing to support their infantry with fire and preventing the enemy from regrouping. One of the most important functions of the chariots was to pursue the fleeing enemy. When the enemy army fled, it was the chariots that turned the retreat into complete annihilation. No infantrymen could escape from a fast chariot. Chariots were also effectively used to combat enemy chariots. In such battles, the skill of the charioteers and the accuracy of the archers came to the fore. Egyptian machines, thanks to their lightness and maneuverability, often gained an advantage over the heavier chariots of their opponents. What if I showed you a weapon that made the chariot truly deadly? Light and fast on its own, the chariot was merely a platform. Its true power was revealed only in combination with another technological marvel of the time, the composite bow. Unlike a simple wooden bow, a composite bow was a complex composite product. Its base was made of wood, but on the inside, facing the archer, it was reinforced with horn plates, and on the outside it was glued with layers of animal tendons. This sandwich of different materials had unique properties. Horn worked well under compression, and tendons worked well under tension. This allowed the bow to accumulate a huge amount of energy when the string was pulled. As a result, the composite bow was significantly more powerful and had a longer range than any solid wood bow of the same size. An arrow shot from it could pierce leather and sometimes even bronze armor at a considerable distance. This was a decisive advantage in battle. Another important advantage was its compactness. The composite bow was shorter than the traditional longbow, making it ideal for use in the confined space of a chariot. The archer could turn freely and shoot in any direction. The manufacture of such a bow was an incredibly complex and lengthy process that took several years. Master armorers, or archers, were held in high esteem in Egyptian society. Their secrets were passed down from generation to generation.
The true secret lies in these layers. Horn and sinew must move as one. Rushing the process will only lead
The
to
charioteer's
failure and
quiver
waste
held
of
between 20 and 50 arrows. The arrows also varied. Some had wide tips for striking unprotected targets, while others had narrow, faceted tips for piercing armor. The archer had to quickly select the right type of arrow depending on the situation. Could a single archer really change the course of an entire battle? But the creation of such a complex weapon required an entire industry. In the next chapter, we will take a look at the workshops where the power of the pharaohs was born.
We wrap the sinew tightly now. This is the secret to its strength, passed down through generations for the pharaoh.
Ensure the sinew is taut here, Roma. We cannot allow weakness in the curve.
The mass production of such high-tech weapons as chariots and composite bows required Egypt to create a complex and efficient production system. It was a real industry working for the needs of the army. The centers of production were the royal arsenals located in large cities such as Memphis and Thebes. These huge complexes brought together hundreds of craftsmen of various specialties under one roof. The process was divided into many operations. Some workshops were engaged in the preparation and processing of wood. The wood was dried for years to acquire the necessary strength and flexibility before it was handed over to the master wheelwrights. Other craftsmen specialized in leather processing. They made straps for fastenings, woven floors for platforms, harnesses for horses, and shields for charioteers. The quality of the leather was strictly controlled. Metallurgists cast bronze parts, wheel hubs, arrowheads, and spearheads, and elements of armor. Although there was little metal in the construction of chariots, a great deal was required for arming the army. Arms makers who created composite bows were a special caste. Their workshops were the most secretive. The technology of gluing wood, horn, and tendons with fish glue was a state secret. Standardization was an important part of the industry. They tried to make chariot parts interchangeable. This allowed damaged vehicles to be quickly repaired right on the battlefield using spare parts from other chariots. The most famous and largest battle involving chariots was the Battle of Kadesh, which took place around 1294 BC. This grand battle brought together the two greatest empires of the time. The Egyptian kingdom, led by Pharaoh Ramses II.
Charge! Show them the might of Egypt!
Both armies relied heavily on their chariot corps. According to various estimates, between 5,000 and 6,000 chariots from both sides took part in the battle. The Hittite chariots were heavier than the Egyptian ones. Their crew consisted of 3 people, a driver, a spearman, and a shield bearer. They were designed more for ramming and close combat than for long-range fire. The battle began with a ruse by the Hittites. They hid their main forces and, with the help of false reports, convinced Ramses that the enemy was far away. As a result, when the Egyptian army was on the march and stretched out for several kilometers, the Hittites launched a surprise attack.
The scouts report the enemy forces are a full day's march distant, my lord. The southern flank is secure.
2,500 Hittite chariots attacked one of the Egyptian corps, crushing it and breaking through to the pharaoh's camp. Ramses II found himself surrounded, with only his personal guard. The situation seemed hopeless. It was at this critical moment that all the advantages of the light Egyptian chariots became apparent. Ramses personally led the counterattack of his small forces. They circled around the enemy, showering them with a hail of arrows. The heavy Hittite chariots, designed for a single powerful strike, proved ineffective in maneuverable combat. Their crews, armed mainly with spears, could not reach the fast-moving Egyptians. Possessing a powerful chariot army was not only an advantage, but also a huge logistical problem. Each chariot required constant care and maintenance, and its engines, horses, needed food and water.
Faster, move! Hard right now!
During military campaigns, providing horses with fodder and water became a headache for commanders. A single horse consumes dozens of liters of water and several kilograms of feed per day. For an entire army, this amounted to hundreds of tons of cargo that had to be carried along or found on site.
Ensure the third trough is refilled immediately. The next cohort arrives within the hour.
The routes of military campaigns were often laid out not along the shortest path, but from one source of water and pasture to another. Control over wells and rivers in desert areas was the key to the successful movement of the army. Despite their strength, chariots were rather fragile machines. Wooden wheels, leather straps, axles, all of these wore out and broke when traveling over rough terrain. A breakdown in battle was tantamount to death for the crew. Therefore, the army was always followed by a huge convoy of mobile repair workshops. Carpenters, wheelwrights, blacksmiths, and saddlers worked day and night to keep the combat vehicles in working order. The availability of spare parts was no less important than the availability of arrows. Ammunition was another expense. In a large battle, thousands of archers could fire tens or even hundreds of thousands of arrows. Their production and delivery to the front required enormous effort. Despite its long dominance, the era of war chariots could not last forever. New technologies and new tactics gradually negated their advantages, and the formidable weapon of the Pharaohs eventually disappeared from the stage of large-scale warfare. One of the main factors in the decline of chariots was the emergence and widespread use of cavalry. A horseman was more mobile, could operate in rough terrain where a chariot was useless, and was significantly cheaper to maintain. Gradually, people learned to fight effectively on horseback. New breeds of horses appeared, strong enough to carry a rider in armor. Cavalry could perform all the same functions as chariots: reconnaissance, quick strikes on the flanks, pursuit, but did so more effectively. At the same time, infantry tactics were also improving. Military leaders realized that the best defense against chariots was a dense formation, bristling with spears. Special means of combat also appeared. Infantrymen learned to scatter spikes or sharpen stakes on the battlefield, which crippled horses and broke wheels. Economic factors also played a role. Maintaining huge chariot armies was incredibly expensive. During the period of decline and weakening of central power in Egypt and other states, there were simply no resources left to maintain this elite branch of the military. The so-called collapse of the Bronze Age, associated with the invasion of the Sea Peoples, also dealt a blow to the classical armies. The new enemies used different tactics based on the actions of large masses of light infantry, against which chariots were not always effective. Gradually, the war chariot began to disappear from the battlefields. It retained its status as an elite weapon, a symbol of power and wealth for a long time. Kings and commanders continued to use it for parades, hunting, and as personal transportation. But its military role was over. The formidable weapon that had defined warfare in the Middle East for several centuries had become a museum piece. It was replaced by new forces, cavalry, and disciplined heavy infantry. Nevertheless, the legacy of chariots is enormous. They revolutionized warfare, focusing for the first time on speed, mobility, and range combat. Many of the principles established in that distant era continued to live on and develop in the tactics of subsequent centuries. The era of chariots was a bright but short flash in the long history of warfare. It showed how a single technological innovation could change the world and elevate a civilization. We see how the war chariot changed the history of ancient Egypt, transforming it from a static infantry power into a mobile and aggressive empire. It was not just a horse-drawn cart, but a complex weapon system that included advanced technology, elite warriors, and a sophisticated industrial base. The Egyptians did not invent the chariot, but they perfected it. The lessons learned from bitter defeat allowed them to create a weapon that ensured their dominance throughout the Middle East for several centuries. The history of the Egyptian chariot is a tribute to engineering and the ability to adapt to new challenges.
Ready the chariots!
Please suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes.